So the proof for VAWA, how do you prove your VAWA case? What are the things you need to show to show that you qualify to prove for VAWA? First of all, you have to show the status of your abuser. Is this person a US citizen or green card holder? How do you show that? Well, birth certificate works. Passport, biographic page of the passport. Sometimes you don't have this because what is typical to my VAWA clients are sometimes they're not in a position to have this information because of the abuse. So sometimes we have to think outside the box. We've been able to, get voting records, right, Tanya? We look for voting records to show if the person voted, then they must have been a US citizen, right? Or sometimes if there's been a prior filing for them, say that the abuser had filed for an I-130, which was approved, and then, the abuse continued to go on and that case was stopped. We can use the I-130 as proof that the abuser was a US citizen or a green card holder. And sometimes we do a FOIA. We go get the records of the abuser through something called the Freedom of Information Act to get the status of the person. So there are many ways that you can get this information. Sometimes you just have to think outside the box. So bona fide marriage requirements. You have to show that it's a real marriage. You cannot file for VAWA if you got into a sham marriage and the person is treating you badly or being abusive, right? So there's nothing that derails a case as much as a sham marriage. You must prove that it's a legitimate marriage. And what they're looking for is at the time you got married to this person, what was your intention? Was it your intention to be with this person legitimately, for real? That's what they're looking for when they're looking for whether it's a bona fide marriage. At the time you entered the marriage, was it a real marriage? And the marriage also has to be legal, because if you're married to somebody who you should not legally be married to, such as somebody who's underage, that's not a valid marriage. So basically, for a legal marriage, you have to show that where you got married recognizes that marriage as a legal marriage, right? So this goes for like same-sex couples, right? If you're married in a country that does not recognize your marriage, then you cannot use that marriage in America. But luckily, in the United States of America, all 50 states recognize same-sex marriages. So if you're married here in the United States, you have a legal marriage. Then the good faith portion of the evidentiary requirement is you have to show that it's a legitimate marriage. And how do you show this? I've done a lot of videos on how to show you're in a bona fide marriage. USCIS loves to see financial commingling. They like to see that your lives are financially commingled, such as, you're filing taxes together, you have bank statements, joint bank accounts, you have, big ticket items, you have bought them together, or, you have photographs with family, friends, there are many ways to show it's a good faith marriage. If you have children or stepchildren, you want to be listed as an emergency contact in their schools. You want to show that people know you, both of you, as a couple. So that's why when we ask, to give us pictures that show not just you and your spouse having dinner together, but maybe in larger settings, maybe a barbecue, family functions, that kind of stuff. So, there are many ways to prove a good faith marriage, but it's important that you show that that's the basis of our petition, right? Because sometimes, people, get into this sham marriages and they're being treated badly, being blackmailed. You can't file for VAWA if you can't show it's a good faith marriage. Now, I have to also note that sometimes your abuser stops you from having this evidence as part of the abuse. They won't get a joint account with you. They won't, put you on the lease, and all that is part of the control to prevent you from being able to get your green card unless they want to get it for you. So those are the problems with VAWA cases. But we in my law firm, we've always been able to think outside the box, to be able to present your story and present your evidence. Okay, so even if you don't have the bona fide requirements, it shouldn't stop you from filing for VAWA. You need to talk to a lawyer and explain your situation, and they will help you think through the process of meeting your evidentiary burden. Now, actually, I shouldn't have gone to that. How do I go back? Good. So the other thing you have to show in a VAWA case is that you lived with the abuser. You must live with the abuser. Now, there's no specific time requirement. VAWA doesn't say you have to live with them for 3 months. And the reason is, of course, because the government doesn't want to put people in dangerous situations where they force themselves to stay with an abuser just because they're trying to get a green card. However, you must have lived with them for a period of time. It could be 1 week, maybe more, maybe, whatever. Typically, everything, you have to be able to tell your story. So if you haven't lived with them for a long time, you have to be able to explain what happened, what was the abusive behavior that made you realize that this is not a good situation for me to be in and I gotta go. So that's part of the story you have to tell. However, there are people that typically, actually, let me back up. Typically, with VAWA cases, the abuse has to happen in the United States, right? So even if you're married to a US citizen and they abused you outside the country and you were able to get to the United States and, but you never had any relationship with them, you can't file VAWA if the abuse didn't happen in the United States. But there's an exception. There's always an exception in law, right? And as lawyers, we're always looking for that exception. So you have to show that maybe the person works for the government, maybe the person's in the military and is stationed outside. And in that case, it's okay if the abuse happened outside the United States. All right. So let's go back to the next. So now we're going to the battery or extreme cruelty. Note that it's not just battery, which is physical abuse, like somebody hitting you, punching you. It's also extreme cruelty. Because a lot of people think that if they're not being physically assaulted, they can't qualify for VAWA. And I spent a lot of time on this topic telling you abuse can be more than physical abuse, right? So remember this, that it doesn't have to be just physical abuse. And we use this abuse power wheel to show our clients the different types of abuse. There can be physical abuse, which we all know: pushing, shoving, hitting, slapping, choking, pulling hair, punching, kicking, grabbing, using weapons against the person, beating, throwing the person down. And it always has her here. Disregard that. It could be him as well. But it could also be, emotional. It could be economic abuse, financial abuse. It could be sexual abuse. And so I'm going to go through a bunch of the different types of conducts that USCIS considers abusive, right? So, but what you need to understand, that abuse, at the root of all abuse, is power and control, right? So when you're in this relationship where you have no power and you have no control, and this person is, making decisions and, treating you in a way that renders you powerless, you might want to talk to a lawyer and see if you qualify for VAWA, okay? So the last thing you prove, I'm going to go back into the battery extreme cruelty in more details. I just want to get over the proof right now. Another thing you have to show is that you're a person of good moral character, right? And typically, the government looks at 3 years preceding the filing of VAWA, but they allow themselves to look for as long as they want. So even though the look back period for filing VAWA is 3 years, sometimes they look a little longer than that. So the issue, if you're a person who might have a challenge in proving good moral character, such as if you've had some kind of criminal violation, is to find out whether we can waive that. A waiver is a forgiveness. We want to know if it's waivable. If it's waivable, then we'll file the appropriate waiver forms and you can still file your VAWA. Or we want to see if it's connected to the abuse, right? So for instance, you're married to somebody who abuses you financially, won't give you money, knows you can't work, and will dole out money when they're in a good mood, and then you go to, a store and you steal, that is a crime that's connected to the abuse. So if you can show that that crime was committed as a result of the financial abuse you were suffering, you should be able to file VAWA without a problem.